Who wins here, Apple or Beats?
Well, I don't think shareholders do, because unless there's something to this deal that JMP Securities doesn't see on the surface, then Apple has just spent a lot of money to do something that, A, I think is backward looking to where it's come from versus where it needs to go, and B, is something that it should have been able to do internally itself. So we're wondering at JMP Securities where the innovation, where the imagination is going to come from Apple to take it to the next level.
Cory?
Well, here's my question is to what degree do the contracts that Beats struck with the music industry walk with Beats? Are there change in control provisions, or can Beats sort of now take all the streaming rights that they had acquired and negotiated with the record industry and bring those and hand deliver those to Apple so that Apple hits the ground running with a music streaming service like Spotify, similar to Pandora, and do the thing that Apple, for whatever reason, has not been successful at? And perhaps just because Apple had really ticked off the music industry with the legacy iTunes deals, that Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre can write a deal with the music industry that Apple couldn't. And now Apple's got that deal in pocket. What do you think? Do you think they have those deals with them?
I think that's an unknown. We'll have to see. What we don't know even is the scale of the Beats business model at present. So what kind of numbers should Apple be penciling in? I think you can make a business case if you're Apple, based on your number of users, based on your 800 million credit cards on file, that you can make this deal work. You can pencil that in. But the question mark comes back to, again, at what kind of return to shareholders will this entail, and are there any barriers to entry, those deals you're talking about, that keep the next Spotify or something from just doing one better?
Let's bring John in on this. John Erlichman in L.A. You know, Tim Cook in his statement talked about the Berlin Wall between San Francisco and L.A., wanting to bridge that, wanting to bridge the differences between Apple and the music industry. What do you make of that? And is Beats really the solution?
I mean, it could be. I think, you know, in following what Alex said, we heard today from George Blankenship, who was an Apple executive who played a big role in their retail strategy, and he told us that he does think that there's something we're not talking about yet, which will come to light in the months after this deal, which will make a little bit more sense. But, you know, I think that you see how people are consuming music today, Emily. It is changing from when Steve Jobs was pushing the idea of being able to buy any track you want at any time. People are very comfortable with subscription services right now. And even if there is some fine print that makes it challenging or made it challenging to get all the licensing stuff worked out, Eddie Q, who you highlighted, who was in that picture along with Tim Cook and Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, made it very clear in the release that they are offering both this subscription service and the iTunes radio service that Apple released not too long ago. So they are very much seeing these as companions at a time when obviously there's a very different kind of music consumption taking place.
And, you know, they also said that Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine are going to go work at Apple. Dre saying he's going to do whatever it takes, though he will still keep producing music, but he'll do whatever it takes for Apple. Do you think this is Tim Cook trying to make his mark? Alex, I know that Iovine and Jobs were very good friends, but is this Tim Cook trying to put his stamp on the company?
Well, if it is, I think it's an example of Tim Cook failing to make a significant mark, because I think this goes back to its legacy roots in music. We know iPod sales are falling. We know iTunes sales are falling. And this looks like a doubling down on music. So the great concern that I would have as an Apple shareholder is Tim Cook or Apple thinking with its heart, like it says in the press release, or using its mind?
See, I think this is Apple thinking about risk. I think one of the things you see with Tim Cook is consistently thinking about risk rather than just opportunity. So that, you know, if you were to look at all the music streaming services out there, which one has a defensible, probably profitable business attached to it? The headphone manufacturer, right? So he's thinking, hey, we've got I'm presuming what he's thinking, like I know. But perhaps he's thinking, there's a profitable headphone manufacturer. It's subsidizing this digital business. Our headphones will be a little bit better. Our digital business will be a little bit better. We'll fix the problem we've got with falling music sales or falling iPod sales and slowing digital sales. Do you see that as the way that Apple sort of thinks of itself right now?
If that's their calculus, that's doomed to failure, because there is no way that there's a margin structure in headphones that's defendable over time. That's just not going to work. It didn't work for Sony back in the day.
But a better margin structure than Spotify has, because they've got that sort of supporting the business.
I think there has to be something in the discovery, in the contracts that you alluded to make this deal make more sense over time. because from a hardware perspective, that's a commodity business. And I think that's the great concern for investors. There hasn't been enough advances in software, in new business avenues, to make you convinced that Apple can hold up its margin structure, which is way above anything the norm in hardware right now.
What does this say, John, about Apple's confidence in the future of iTunes?
Well, I think that they feel like there is still a big business in selling people either tracks or albums. And the numbers from Apple are enormous. I mean, we can definitely see trends where people are choosing streaming services instead of just buying albums. But look, you guys just highlighted the idea that they're doubling down on music. They are doubling down on music. They're clearly staying in an area that they are very comfortable with, and I think they feel like having a couple of very well-known people from the music industry coming in and breathing some new life into how they think about all this might make this a winning strategy.
We were looking at some trends yesterday from SurveyMonkey about how people are listening to music, and Pandora was far and away in the lead, and Apple was at in the middle of the pack with Spotify, with Sirius.
There's another great example of a market that Apple let get away from itself. It let Pandora champion that. It let Beats champion the headsets when it should have done. Well, this begs the question, is this the beginning of a massive acquisition spree for Apple? And if this is kicking it off, it doesn't inspire...
Steve Jobs tried to buy Dropbox. And that
at least in the eyes of JMP Securities, this doesn't inspire a lot of confidence at how it's going to start about.